My name is Jessica Morgan, I'm 36 years old. I've been married for 17 years. I met my current husband, Daniel Morgan, at my first job. He was a new employee and he came on strong from the start. To be honest, he wasn't my type, but I decided to date him anyway. As time went on, Daniel cornered me into a situation where I had no choice but to marry him, even getting his father to plead with me. He's 30, drifting aimlessly. If he settles down, he'll change. He's going to inherit my business someday. What do you say? Eventually, I gave in and married Daniel. Soon after our marriage, I got pregnant. A year later, our son, Tyler, was born. My mother-in-law became like a real mother to me, taking care of everything. I was expecting the usual mother-in-law and daughter-in-law issues after getting married, but my mother-in-law was different. She took great care of her grandson, Tyler. We rented an apartment just a few minutes' walk from her place. Moreover, the apartment was owned by my father-in-law, so we lived there for free. I was blessed in many ways. However, Daniel's negative traits slowly became more evident. His nights out became more extravagant, involving gambling, women, and alcohol. My father-in-law was soft on Daniel, paying him a hefty salary that didn't match his work and letting him do whatever he wanted with the family credit card. I wasn't struggling for money, but life was getting uncertain just a year into our marriage. Yet, my mother-in-law was always there to help with childcare and lend an ear to my complaints. Without her, I couldn't have continued with this marriage. But after 17 years of marriage, a decisive event occurred between me and Daniel. Is Dad not coming home again tonight? Tyler started high school this year. He attends a prestigious private high school. He often said, "Why did you marry such a man, Mom? All he does at home is drink and read the horse racing news. I can't see what you saw in him." The fact that I couldn't immediately answer him was telling. But if you and Dad get a divorce, won't it be hard for Tyler? Why would it be hard? I'm all for it, actually. Grandma thinks the same. Keeping up appearances for Dad and just enduring it is so outdated. You're still in your 30s, Mom. You should enjoy your life more. When did Tyler become so grown up? He was becoming my sole reason to live. That's what I thought. I wanted Tyler to become a worthy heir and take away Daniel's position and honor. Well, we do live a normal life thanks to Dad's family, though. It's Dad's money that's making him arrogant. The women who flock to him are only after his money, right? He'll only realize how lonely he is when he's penniless. Daniel never helped with parenting, nor did I ever see him have a good conversation with Tyler. It's no wonder Tyler didn't warm up to a father like that. They might as well have been strangers. It's natural that their relationship turned into aversion. Speaking of which, I've been feeling unwell lately. Probably due to the stress from Daniel. I'm in my 40s now, I can't stay healthy forever. Thinking it was about time, I decided to go to the hospital the next day. I had Tyler at 19, and among my mom friends, I was the young one, but maybe my body is telling the truth. I was speechless at what the doctor said. "You might have breast cancer, so please stay in the hospital for tests." Breast cancer? Why me? The first person I called was my mother-in-law. On the verge of panicking, my mother-in-law said she would stay with me in the hospital. By then, I knew no words could reassure me. The next day, after Tyler went to school as usual, I headed to the hospital for my admission. My steps were heavy. Daniel didn't come home last night either. After years of marriage, I could tell he was seeing someone specific. Thanks to my father-in-law, I got a private room in the hospital. My mother-in-law was there before me, and I almost cried when I saw her face. Did you tell Daniel and Tyler about the breast cancer tests? No, not yet. Daniel hasn't been home much lately anyway. But I plan to tell him once the test results are out. Let's do this, Jessica. Tell Daniel you only have 3 months to live. It'll be a good lesson for him. If he thinks you're dying, maybe he'll finally appreciate you. Otherwise, he'll never change. As his mother, I feel so sorry for this. I thought it was a pretty good plan. It was a lie. But it might reveal Daniel's true nature. Unless you say your condition's worsening, Daniel won't even bother to visit the hospital. I'll exaggerate a bit. I wondered what Daniel's reaction would be. He might be a little shaken and come to visit. I fell asleep in the hospital bed with a sliver of hope. The next day, after hearing from his mother, Daniel did come to visit. But it was far from what I expected. I sold the house and am going on a trip with my lover. See ya, useless woman. His words were shocking. He wanted me gone. Daniel left the hospital without waiting for my response. I lay there, speechless. What was the point of our marriage? Was it all just for appearances? I felt more emptiness than anger. But my mother-in-law was different. She was shaking with rage. Don't worry, leave it to me. She seemed to have something planned. I found out what it was the following week. I was about to be discharged after completing all the tests. That day, Tyler came to visit with his grandmother. Suddenly, the door burst open and Daniel stumbled in, looking disheveled. We all sensed something was wrong instantly. Daniel's hair was a mess, and he looked unclean. He threw a large carry-on bag and stood there, excited but weak. Mom! Look what you've done! Do you have any idea what I went through to get here? What are you talking about? My mother-in-law played dumb. It seemed things went exactly as she planned. Dad smells. Didn't you take a shower? Weren't you supposed to go on a trip? You made a mess preparing for it. That's right, Daniel was going on a trip with his mistress. Taking advantage of Mom being in the hospital to go on a trip with a mistress? He's the worst. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was right to discuss mistresses and such in front of high schooler Tyler. It must be quite raw for him at this sensitive age. Shut up! And who stopped the family credit card, Mom? Why would you do that? Because of you, I was embarrassed. The money from the family credit card is there because your father worked for it. It's not a magic card for you to use at your whim. I'll never forgive this. This is the first time I've felt such humiliation. Daniel, getting emotional, began to explain what had happened. When he heard I only had 3 months to live, Daniel was genuinely happy, thinking he could avoid the hassle of divorce. It was because he had a woman he loved. The woman was Amber Williams, a hostess at the club Daniel often visited. Daniel had been pursuing her for a year before she agreed to date him. That's why Daniel was so infatuated with Amber. He had even rented an apartment for Amber to have their rendezvous anytime they wanted. The apartment was owned by Daniel's father, so there was no rent to pay. Amber was a very demanding woman. Her whims, 22 years younger than Daniel, must have seemed adorable to him. I could easily imagine Daniel proudly buying her whatever she wanted with the family credit card. Daniel wanted Amber all to himself, so he asked her to quit her job. But Amber's response was, then spend more money on me. If you can support me with the same amount I earn at the club, I'll quit. I want to live a luxurious life and have lots of things I want. Your money, Mr. Morgan, is nowhere near enough. And she showed no signs of quitting. Desperate for a large sum of money, Daniel had made this request to his father. Dad, isn't it about time you retire? You're over 70 now, and I bet your energy's not what it used to be. You might not notice, but you've been forgetful lately, and it's affecting the business. You wouldn't want our real estate reputation to suffer, would you? I've been watching you work up close, so why not let me take over? But Daniel's father knew better. Of course, he did. He had raised Daniel and seen him up close more than anyone. He knew that if he left the company to Daniel, it would collapse in no time. He saw right through Daniel's plan to sell all his apartments for a quick fortune. His father was wise and had been in business for years, with a steady monthly income from the apartment rentals. But Daniel preferred the gamble over stability, ready to plunge in headfirst. I'm still fit to work. As long as I can see, I won't let Daniel do as he pleases. Haven't I given you enough money? I'm just worried about you, Dad. You have to drive around for showings, right? But you know how accidents with elderly drivers are on the rise? Maybe it's time to give up your license and retire, enjoy yourself. I couldn't believe he could say such things so lightheartedly. In a way, I respected that. In the end, without a fortune, Daniel kept going to the club where Amber worked every day. Even if he got Amber, he was just another customer to her. Daniel started to panic. I didn't know this, but he had apparently consulted with his father and mother-in-law about wanting to divorce me. He wanted to divorce me and remarry Amber. Perhaps because he hadn't forgotten the favor of asking me to marry into their family, his father opposed the divorce. His mother thought that divorce might be better for me, but she couldn't agree with the reason for it. Daniel was desperately pleading, but Amber had no intention of marrying him at all. It should have been obvious, but Daniel convinced himself that not divorcing me was the reason Amber wouldn't marry him. Then Amber made the biggest request she ever had. She wanted to open her own club. At her current club, Amber was getting older. And probably realized she couldn't compete with the younger girls anymore. So, she thought of topping that by opening her own club. It didn't have to be big. As long as she could work the way she wanted and make a profit with a good team, she'd be thrilled. Without any guilt, Amber said, "Hey, Mr. Morgan, I want my own club. Look, I checked out some real estate today and found a great place." She showed Daniel the property details. Despite working in real estate for years, Daniel didn't know much about the market or the details. He hadn't been serious about his job. "We need to pay the down payment quickly before someone else snatches it up. It's hard to find such good conditions. The real estate agent said it's a real find. So, please, can you pay the down payment?" Daniel was troubled. His available funds were limited. But he couldn't let go of Amber just like that. Desperately, he tapped into the company's money. He knew his father would find out eventually. But at that moment, being cut off by Amber was scarier than anything his father might do. Amber started preparing for her club, overjoyed. Daniel began to seriously consider marrying Amber. She was relying on him, needed him. Daniel's desire to marry her grew stronger. How could he bring up the divorce? He seemed to have thought about it, but it wasn't my fault. I had been devoted to Daniel all this time. Not working, gambling, constantly cheating, all the bad things were on Daniel's side. His parents were against divorce and remarriage too. Then came my terminal illness diagnosis. For Daniel, it must have been an unexpected boon. He declared his trip with Amber without any regard for me. He talked about selling the house, but the apartment we lived in belonged to his father. It was in his father's name. So, he gave up on selling it. First, he would fulfill his long-held wish to travel to a tropical island with Amber. Right after receiving my terminal diagnosis from his mother, Daniel arranged for hotels and plane tickets. Then he came to my hospital room and scornfully called me a useless woman. The trip with Amber was to Hawaii. As soon as they arrived at the hotel, Amber said, "First, I want to go shopping." To her, shopping was the only purpose. That's when the biggest incident happened. Amber picked out several designer items, and when Daniel tried to pay, the clerk acted strangely. The card wasn't working. That shouldn't be possible. The family card had no spending limit. Daniel panicked. Amber's mood worsened rapidly. When he contacted the card company, they said the family card had been suspended. Daniel must have turned pale. "Sorry, there's been some mistake and the card isn't working." "What? That's not what you said. You told me I could buy anything I wanted, that's why I came. How are we supposed to spend the next 3 days? Do you have any cash on you?" "No, I've always just used the family card, so I don't carry cash." "That's the worst. I'll call Dad and get it sorted out, so please cheer up." Amber, ignoring Daniel, went back to the hotel alone. Daniel, in a fit of anger, called his father-in-law. But there was no answer. "What's going on? Making me look like a fool." Even after returning to the hotel, Amber remained upset and wouldn't speak to Daniel. Reluctantly, she had to use her card to pay for things, while Daniel couldn't even buy food or leave the hotel. He was just stuck in the hotel room, unable to do anything despite being in Hawaii. Daniel's resentment towards his mother-in-law grew. She was the only one who would have stopped the card. Just when his marriage to Amber was becoming a reality, it all fell apart. What was the point of all he had done for Amber? This must have been a significant blow to him, and humiliating. "Mr. Morgan, just to confirm, there's no problem with my club, right? You said, I have plenty of money. Leave it to me, so I've been moving forward with the opening. I've even made the invitations and most of the preparations are done. It's too late to back out now." The first words he heard from her were so cutting. "Of course, it's fine. It was Amber's dream, after all. I'm sorry, Amber, for this boring trip." "You have her plane tickets back, right? And the hotel is paid for? You're not expecting me to pay, are you?" "The plane and hotel are already taken care of. Listen, I'll definitely pay you back when we get back to New York. Can you lend me some money? I can't even buy a snack." I'm so hungry. What? I'm barely managing as it is. I don't have a cent to lend you. I had planned to do all sorts of sightseeing, and we can't even go to the beach. What's the point of coming to Hawaii? Sorry, but I've seen Mr. Morgan's limits. I can't see a future with you anymore. Then came another silent period. It lasted until they arrived in New York, and they went their separate ways at the airport. Daniel hadn't eaten or drunk anything for 3 days and nights, and was at his limit. But he didn't even have enough money for the train fare home from the airport. With heavy steps, dragging his carry-on, he walked and walked. And finally, he arrived at my hospital room, looking disheveled. He blamed everything on the family card being blocked, attacking his mother-in-law. It must have been a huge success in her eyes. Daniel, compared to what you've done to Jessica, this is still not enough. It's unprecedented for a husband to go on a trip with his mistress as soon as his longtime wife gets a terminal illness diagnosis. I'm cutting ties with you. I care about Jessica much more than my own son. Humph. Even if you say that, Mom, what about Dad? He's always been on my side, no matter what. Hey! A sharp voice rang out, and my father-in-law entered. I've heard everything. I'm disowning you. It's my fault for spoiling you. You're going to pay back every penny you took from the company. I might have heard such harsh words and seen such a stern face from my father-in-law for the first time. You're also fired from the company, so don't bother coming back. And leave the apartment you're living in. You need to start from scratch and make your own way. For Daniel, who had been soaking in a warm bath for 48 years, a harsh life was surely waiting. Shut up! Shut up! Fine. It works out for me anyway. I wanted to divorce Jessica. Now I can finally remarry the young and cute Amber. As for work, once Amber opens her store, we can live off its earnings. His voice trembled with desperate bravado. Excuse me for a moment. My mother-in-law left the room briefly and returned with Amber, Daniel's mistress. Amber! Why are you here? I called her. What's going on? Mr. Morgan said he had something to discuss, so I came, but... No, I didn't contact her. Mom, did you call her? Stop interfering, seriously, you never get it. Bringing a mistress to his wife's hospital room, talk about a mismatch. This was my first time meeting Amber, and she looked just like Daniel's type. He wanted submissiveness from his wife, but preferred flashy, extroverted women as mistresses. That hasn't changed since the old days. Amber, what you've done is unforgivable. You knew Daniel was married and still had an affair with him, didn't you? We will claim alimony as our rightful due. And just so you know, I've already spoken to a lawyer. What? I'm not Mr. Morgan's mistress or anything. We haven't even been intimate. Whether that was a lie or the truth, it was her word against his, impossible to prove. Maybe Amber was just saying that to escape blame. Really? Right, Mr. Morgan? Daniel's small, rigid reaction made me think it might be true. Was he just financially supporting her in hopes of a physical relationship? It was so pitiful it was almost laughable. Actually, Mr. Morgan and I aren't even dating, let alone having an affair. I'm troubled by these accusations. So it was just one-sided feelings from Daniel. Was this a so-called sugar daddy situation? No, Amber, remember what you said. If I gave money for the store, we'd be together. Mr. Morgan only paid the down payment, right? You never brought the rest of the money despite my reminders. So I used all my savings. I don't need a man like you anymore. Bye, useless man. Wait, Amber! Watching Daniel desperately cling to a young woman was pathetic. Tyler couldn't help but blurt out. Ew, that's gross. As Amber tried to leave the room, it wasn't Daniel, but my mother-in-law who grabbed her arm. Just a moment, we're not done talking. What now, seriously, give me a break. I've told you, Mr. Morgan and I are nothing. You seem to know nothing. What strong card did my mother-in-law hold? She had been making moves I didn't know about. You have a boyfriend, don't you? So what? Why do I have to tell you that? It's none of your business. Daniel reacted to her answer. Amber, you had a boyfriend? You never told me that. Were you bringing him to the apartment I rented for you? Daniel, be quiet. Amber, you're being deceived by that boyfriend. What is this conversation turning into? The story was jumping all over, hard to follow. Huh? What are you talking about, old lady? I had a detective look into you and Daniel through my lawyer. You gave your store's startup money to your boyfriend, right? He's run off with it. What? No way. My boyfriend and I have promised to marry. We were planning a lavish wedding with the profits from the successful store. Don't make up lies just because you don't like me. If you think it's a lie, try calling him now. I bet you won't be able to reach him. That's impossible. Amber pulled out her smartphone with a smirk. No ringtone. Probably blocked. Amber repeatedly put the phone to her ear. Growing increasingly anxious, clearly visible to anyone watching. Why is this happening? See? He's not answering, is he? There are even more bad rumors about your boyfriend. You've been completely fooled. It's really laughable. Well done. It was a splendid counterattack by my mother-in-law. I felt relieved too. Amber was trembling. Understandably so. She had been swindled out of a large sum of money by a boyfriend she trusted. Her dream of opening her own shop would likely be dashed now. I felt a bit sorry for her. It's not my place to say, but Amber, you have terrible luck with men. Still, neither Daniel nor Amber, you haven't apologized to Jessica at all. What kind of nerve do you have? Well, never mind, my punishment ends here. So, what will you do, Jessica? Yes. Divorce is the only option. I answered immediately, intending it to be the final blow. After all, Daniel had wanted to divorce me, so he should agree quickly. It seemed Daniel never expected me to be the one to initiate the divorce. When faced with a situation where someone takes a superior stance, his fragile pride quickly turned to anger. Fine, I'll divorce you. But don't expect any support for your future life. You've enjoyed luxury only because of me. You'll realize that when I'm gone. Don't come crawling back. Be quiet. You'll understand what it means, Daniel. Your father just said it, you're disowned, for real. Your father and I will take responsibility for Jessica and Tyler, so don't worry. Are you sure about this, Jessica? Are you really okay with it? Yes, of course. By useless, penniless man. I felt a sense of refreshment. Afterward, Daniel ended up shouldering $400,000, including alimony and debts to his parents. He would be under their constant watch until he repaid everything. A few days later, my test results came in. Fortunately, I didn't have breast cancer. But I couldn't let my guard down. I decided to have regular breast cancer screenings and comprehensive health checkups every year. Life with Tyler began after my discharge from the hospital. It was so relaxing and peaceful. Thinking about Daniel, who hardly ever came home, and knowing he would never return, brought a real sense of relief. Our divorce didn't happen immediately. Because Daniel kept making a fuss. My in-laws, realizing it wasn't good for Daniel to continue like this, decided to disown him and cut off all communication. It was a tough punishment for him, but I knew my in-laws were worried sick about him. Sure enough, Daniel ended up begging his father for help. His father put him to work in a food service job to learn how to interact with people, to appreciate the value of money, and to toughen up. Daniel was now living in an apartment, undergoing the most challenging training of his life. Meanwhile, Tyler said to me, "Mom, I'll protect you from now on. You're not alone, and good things are sure to come." Hearing such a heartfelt line from Tyler almost brought me to tears. When had he become so strong and resilient? Tyler was my reason to live. I am grateful to Daniel for giving me Tyler. And for introducing me to my father-in-law and mother-in-law. That much, I do thank Daniel for.